For 30 years, Daniel Whitmore was known as the man who had everything. A billionaire CEO, a visionary who built a global empire, a man millions admired and thousands trusted. But on one cold night, inside the mansion that represented his success, everything changed. Police arrived at his private estate expecting to investigate a possible emergency. Instead, they discovered one of America's most powerful businessmen dead inside his own study. The doors were locked. The security system showed no sign of an intruder. Nothing valuable had been taken. But one important thing was missing: his phone. And the final person who saw Daniel Whitmore alive claimed they had left the mansion hours before his death. No witnesses. No clear explanation. Only questions. How could a man surrounded by wealth, technology, and protection disappear inside his own home without anyone knowing what happened? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The man at the center of this mystery was not an ordinary businessman. Daniel Whitmore was a billionaire CEO, a respected entrepreneur, a media favorite, a family man, and a philanthropist known for donating millions to causes around the world. For years, America watched his journey with admiration. He was seen as the perfect example of success. A man who started with ambition, built a powerful company, and created a legacy that reached far beyond business. Millions admired him. Thousands worked for him. Investors trusted his decisions. Families looked at his story as proof that determination and hard work could create an extraordinary future. But after Daniel Whitmore was found dead inside his mansion, investigators began discovering that the public image only showed one side of his life. Behind the success, behind the magazine covers, and behind the powerful reputation was a story filled with unanswered questions. When police entered the estate that night, they immediately noticed something unusual. There were no signs of forced entry. The security system showed no record of an intruder entering the property. The cameras surrounding the mansion had stopped recording at a critical moment, almost as if someone understood exactly how the security system worked. Inside Daniel Whitmore's private study, everything looked almost untouched. His luxury watch was still on his wrist. His wallet remained where it was. His safe had not been opened. Nothing valuable appeared to be missing. Nothing suggested a simple robbery. But investigators knew something was wrong. If someone came for money, why did they leave behind millions of dollars in valuables? If this was a personal attack, why were there so few signs of what happened? Then detectives discovered another troubling detail. A handwritten note that had reportedly been inside the mansion was missing before investigators arrived. At first, it seemed like a small piece of information. But in a case where every detail mattered, that missing note could become one of the most important clues in uncovering the truth behind Daniel Whitmore's death. During the previous 24 hours, several people had entered and left the mansion. Employees, family members, business associates, close friends, people who claimed they knew Daniel Whitmore better than anyone else, people who said they cared about him, people who insisted they had nothing to hide. But as detectives began looking closer, they realized something disturbing. Everyone connected to the mansion had a story, and some stories were not matching. The truth would not be found by searching for a stranger outside the walls of the estate. It would be found by examining the people who were closest to Daniel Whitmore. Before investigators could understand what happened inside Daniel Whitmore's mansion, they first needed to understand the man behind the company, the wealth, and the public image. Because every mystery begins with one important question: who was the person at the center of it all? Long before the private jets, luxury properties, and billion-dollar empire, Daniel Whitmore was just an ambitious young man with a vision. He did not grow up surrounded by unlimited wealth. He did not inherit a business empire. Everything he built came from years of sacrifice, difficult decisions, and a determination to create something greater than himself. People who knew Daniel in his early years described him as someone who was always searching for the next opportunity. A man who worked harder than those around him. A man who believed every setback was only another step toward success. He took small jobs. He faced rejection. He spent years learning every part of business from the ground up. While others saw obstacles, Daniel Whitmore saw challenges that could be overcome. Eventually, those years of dedication transformed his simple idea into a global company. His name became connected with innovation, leadership, and success. Business magazines told his story. Industry leaders praised his decisions. He received awards and appeared at major events alongside some of the most influential people in the world. His lifestyle became a symbol of achievement. A private jet waiting on the runway, luxury properties across different countries, exclusive charity events attended by celebrities, investors, and powerful figures. To the outside world, Daniel Whitmore had everything. A successful company, a beautiful mansion, a respected reputation, a family, a legacy. He became known as the perfect example of the American dream. But after his death, investigators discovered that the story of Daniel Whitmore was more complicated than most people realized. Behind closed doors, the perfect image began to show cracks. Detectives looking into his personal and professional life uncovered events that rarely reached the public. Former executives who once stood beside Daniel Whitmore suddenly left the company. Some resigned without giving clear explanations. Others refused to discuss what happened inside private boardroom meetings. Even relationships within his family appeared more complicated than they seemed from the outside. There were disagreements, arguments, old conflicts that had never fully disappeared. Then investigators looked into his business rivals. Some accused Daniel of making aggressive decisions to protect his empire. Others believed his success came at a cost. To his supporters, Daniel Whitmore was a brilliant businessman who made difficult choices to build something extraordinary. To his critics, he was a powerful man who created rivals along the way. And after his death inside his mansion, detectives had to consider a difficult possibility. Was the success that made Daniel Whitmore famous also the reason someone wanted him gone? Because the deeper investigators looked, the clearer one thing became. This was not only about a billionaire CEO found dead behind locked doors. It was about a man whose decisions affected thousands of lives. A man who created powerful friendships and powerful rivalries. Success gave Daniel Whitmore influence, but it also created people who may have wanted to see him fall. Some wanted control of his company. Some wanted access to his fortune, and some may have wanted revenge. The question investigators now faced was simple. Who had the most to gain from Daniel Whitmore's death? And who had the most to lose if the truth behind his final days was revealed? To understand what happened inside Daniel Whitmore's mansion, investigators had to go back to the beginning. They reconstructed the final 48 hours of his life. Every meeting, every phone call, every conversation, every person who crossed his path. Because somewhere inside those final moments was the answer to what happened inside the home where he once felt safest. 2 days before his death, everything appeared normal. Daniel Whitmore arrived at his company headquarters for a morning board meeting. Executives gathered around the table expecting another routine discussion about the future of the billion-dollar company he had built. But according to people familiar with the meeting, something felt different. Daniel appeared distracted. His attention seemed divided. Then, during the meeting, he received an unexpected phone call. A call that caused him to step away from the room. Nobody knew exactly who was on the other end. Nobody knew what was said. But investigators later discovered that this conversation would become one of the most important moments in Daniel Whitmore's final timeline. After the meeting ended, his schedule suddenly changed. A planned lunch was canceled. A private appointment was moved. Then came another decision that caught investigators' attention. Daniel arranged a private meeting with lawyers. At the time, nobody understood why. Was it connected to his business? Was it something personal? Was Daniel preparing for a legal battle? Or was he protecting himself from someone he no longer trusted? Later that evening, Daniel Whitmore returned to his mansion. The same mansion that represented decades of success. The same place where he celebrated achievements, welcomed guests, and created memories with his family. The home where he believed he was protected. The evening appeared normal. Dinner was prepared. The house was quiet. Everything seemed peaceful, until a mysterious visitor arrived. Someone whose identity would quickly become one of the biggest questions in the investigation. The visitor entered the mansion. Daniel met with the person privately. Nobody else knew what was discussed behind those closed doors. Nobody knew why the meeting happened. But investigators later noticed something important. After the visitor left, Daniel Whitmore appeared different. More cautious, more concerned. Later that night, something changed. Daniel began sending several unusual text messages. Messages that investigators would later describe as unusual and carefully written. They were short. They were controlled. Almost as if Daniel was trying to communicate something without revealing too much. Then suddenly, silence. No more messages. No more calls. No more activity from his phone. The device that contained important information about his final hours went offline. Forever. The next morning, America would wake up to shocking news. Daniel Whitmore, one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, was dead inside his own mansion. But before investigators could understand how it happened, they discovered something hidden within the estate. Something recorded by a security system that was never supposed to reveal the truth. One hidden camera had captured a moment police almost missed. A moment that would completely change the direction of the investigation into Daniel Whitmore's death. The morning after Daniel Whitmore disappeared from public view, everything inside his mansion looked strangely normal. Almost too normal. The lights were still on. The television continued playing quietly in the background. A cup of coffee sat nearby, untouched. Small details that suggested someone had been there only moments earlier. But nobody answered the door. The housekeeper arrived expecting another ordinary morning inside the estate where Daniel Whitmore had spent years building his life. She knew his daily routine. She knew when he usually started his day. She knew the small details that made the mansion feel familiar. But that morning, something felt different. The mansion was silent. Not the peaceful silence of a quiet home, but the kind of silence that suggested something had changed. She called Daniel's name. No response. She knocked on the door. Still nothing. Concerned, she slowly entered the mansion. The front door was unlocked, a detail that would later become one of the biggest questions in the investigation. Because Daniel Whitmore was known for being extremely careful about security, a man surrounded by cameras, alarms, and multiple layers of protection. Yet on this morning, the entrance was open. Inside, everything appeared untouched. The expensive furniture remained perfectly arranged. Valuable items were still in place. Nothing appeared stolen. Nothing appeared damaged. But something was wrong. The housekeeper moved through the mansion searching for any sign of Daniel Whitmore. Then she reached the upper floor, the private area where Daniel spent countless hours making business decisions away from the public eye. The place where he had built plans, signed agreements, and managed his empire. She approached the study. The door was slightly open, and what she discovered inside changed everything. She immediately called for help. Emergency services arrived. Within minutes, police vehicles surrounded the estate. The mansion that once represented Daniel Whitmore's success and achievement had become the center of a major criminal investigation. Detectives entered carefully. Every movement mattered. Every object could tell a story. Crime scene investigators began examining every corner of the study. And almost immediately, they noticed details that did not make sense. A broken glass. Fresh footprints. A missing security hard drive. Small clues suggesting someone had been inside the mansion. But the evidence created more questions than answers. If someone entered the estate, how did they avoid the security system? If someone came to steal something, why leave behind millions of dollars in valuables? And if this was carefully planned, why leave behind clues that could lead investigators closer to the truth? Detectives began questioning whether they were looking at a real crime scene or a carefully created story designed to mislead them. Because the more they examined Daniel Whitmore's mansion, the more one possibility became impossible to ignore. Someone may have wanted investigators to see certain things, and at the same time, they wanted other things to disappear. The broken glass, the missing hard drive, the unlocked door. Every clue seemed important, but together, they created even more mystery. The scene looked almost too perfect, almost arranged. And if someone had manipulated the evidence inside Daniel Whitmore's mansion, then they were not only trying to escape responsibility, they were trying to control the investigation itself. As the investigation into Daniel Whitmore's death continued, detectives realized something uncomfortable. The person responsible might not have been a stranger. They might have been someone who knew the mansion, someone who understood Daniel's daily routine, someone who knew his habits, his security system, and the private areas of his home, someone who knew exactly where to look. So investigators turned their attention toward the people closest to Daniel Whitmore. The first person they examined was his spouse, someone who shared his life, his wealth, and the private moments the public never saw. Investigators wanted to understand everything: their relationship, their recent conversations, their disagreements, their financial connections. Because when powerful people are involved, the closest relationships can sometimes hide the biggest questions. Then detectives looked at Daniel's adult children, the people connected to his family legacy. the people closest to the fortune he had built. Investigators wanted to know if there was tension behind the scenes. Were there disagreements about the future of the company? Were there family conflicts that the public never knew about? Were there secrets hidden behind the image of a successful family? Next, investigators focused on Daniel Whitmore's business partner, someone who had worked beside him for years, someone who understood the company, the decisions, and the pressure behind building a global empire. But detectives discovered that even the strongest partnerships can have hidden conflicts. Money, control, ambition, trust. All of these things can change relationships between powerful people. Then investigators turned their attention to Daniel's former assistant, a person who knew his schedule, his meetings, his habits, the private details that most people never saw. Someone who may have known more about Daniel Whitmore's life than almost anyone outside his family. The head of security was also questioned, the person responsible for protecting Daniel's mansion. The person expected to prevent exactly the type of situation investigators were now facing. But if the security system failed, was it simply a mistake? Or did someone want it to fail? Then came Daniel's personal driver, his financial advisor. Everyone connected to Daniel Whitmore was examined. Every statement was reviewed. Every timeline was tested. And detectives discovered something that made the case even more complicated. Everyone had secrets. Everyone had something they wanted to keep hidden. But investigators knew that having secrets did not automatically make someone responsible. The real question was motive. Because someone had a reason. Someone had a reason powerful enough to risk everything. The possibilities continued growing. Money, inheritance, corporate control, revenge, blackmail, family conflict. Daniel Whitmore had built an empire worth billions. But that same empire created pressure, competition, and people who wanted something from him. Then investigators uncovered a discovery that changed the entire direction of the case. A financial transaction. A payment made only hours before Daniel Whitmore's death. At first, it appeared to be a normal business activity. But when detectives looked closer, they found something unusual hidden inside the details. A connection nobody expected. And suddenly, the biggest question was no longer only, who killed Daniel Whitmore? The question became, what was Daniel Whitmore about to discover before he died? The financial transaction changed everything. For weeks, investigators had been searching for a clear motive behind Daniel Whitmore's death. They had examined the people closest to him. They had studied his business relationships. They had rebuilt his final hours inside the mansion. But this discovery opened an entirely new path. Because the transaction was not random, it connected to a part of Daniel Whitmore's life that very few people knew existed. A hidden side of his business world. A side that never appeared in interviews, magazine articles, or public appearances. Detectives began digging deeper. They brought in digital forensic experts to examine every device connected to Daniel Whitmore. His computer, his company records, his personal accounts, and most importantly, the missing phone that disappeared from his mansion after his death. Investigators believed the answers could be hidden inside conversations someone had tried to erase. The forensic team began recovering deleted messages, fragments of conversations that had disappeared, files that had been removed, digital evidence showing that someone had attempted to hide important information. Then came another breakthrough. Security footage from Daniel Whitmore's mansion began to return. Experts recovered parts of the damaged recordings. But what they found created even more questions. The cameras had not simply stopped working. Important minutes were missing. Minutes that happened around the exact time investigators believed something happened inside the estate. Someone had either disabled the system, or someone understood the security network well enough to manipulate it. The investigation expanded beyond the mansion. Detectives began speaking with neighbors, people who lived close enough to notice unusual activity, people who may have seen something important without realizing it at the time. One neighbor reported hearing what sounded like an argument on the night Daniel Whitmore died. Another witness claimed seeing an unfamiliar luxury SUV near the property, a vehicle that did not belong to the family, a vehicle with no immediate connection to anyone involved. Then anonymous tips began arriving. Some claimed they knew the truth. Others suggested important information had been hidden. Some pointed toward people close to Daniel Whitmore. Others suggested his business rivals may have been involved. The pressure continued to grow. The media followed every new development. News channels analyzed every detail. Experts debated possible explanations. Online investigators created their own theories. Some believed the case was about money. Others believed it involved a secret from Daniel Whitmore's past. Everyone had a theory, but investigators had something the public did not: evidence. And as detectives continued connecting the pieces, they believed they were finally getting closer to the truth. They had a timeline. They had suspects. They had possible motives. They believed they understood what happened inside Daniel Whitmore's mansion. But then, a new piece of evidence appeared. A discovery so unexpected that it destroyed their leading theory. Everything investigators believed about the case suddenly became uncertain. The person they thought was responsible may not have been involved at all, and the truth was pointing somewhere much deeper. Because detectives uncovered something shocking. The real reason behind Daniel Whitmore's death may not have started days before the murder. It may not have started months before. It may have started years earlier. A decision from the past. A secret agreement. A forgotten betrayal. Something that remained hidden until the moment it finally returned. And now investigators faced the most important question of the entire case. Was Daniel Whitmore killed because of something he did? Or because of something someone was afraid he would reveal? As investigators returned to every piece of evidence connected to Daniel Whitmore's death, they began noticing connections they had missed before. The details that once appeared unrelated suddenly started forming a much bigger picture. The missing phone, the deleted messages, the financial transaction, the security failure, the mysterious visitor who arrived at the mansion that final night. None of these clues existed by themselves. Together, they revealed a story that was far more complicated than anyone expected. Investigators uncovered hidden business records that pointed to decisions Daniel Whitmore had made years earlier. Deals that were never revealed to the public. Agreements involving people who were still connected to his life. Then came the discovery of confidential emails. Messages that showed Daniel Whitmore had been dealing with a serious problem that very few people knew about. The man the public believed had complete control over his billion-dollar empire was facing a situation that threatened everything he had spent decades building. His company, his reputation, his family, his legacy. Investigators discovered a hidden financial arrangement that completely changed how they viewed the people surrounding Daniel Whitmore. Because someone had a powerful reason to keep the truth buried. Someone had everything to lose if certain information became public. The perfect success story that America admired was no longer as simple as it appeared. The billionaire CEO who seemed to have everything was protecting secrets. And those secrets carried consequences. The people closest to Daniel Whitmore were forced to confront a reality they never expected. He was not only a victim caught in a mysterious death, he was also a man carrying hidden conflicts, private decisions, and unresolved problems from his past. As detectives connected the evidence, they finally understood why certain events happened the way they did. Why the security system failed. Why Daniel Whitmore's phone disappeared. Why certain people changed their stories. Why some details inside the mansion did not match. But even after investigators connected the major pieces of the case, one final discovery remained. A final piece of information that would completely change how the world viewed Daniel Whitmore's death. Because sometimes the biggest mystery is not only what happened inside the mansion, but why someone was willing to go so far to make sure the truth never came out. For months, investigators followed every possible lead connected to Daniel Whitmore's death. They questioned suspects. They examined evidence. They rebuilt the final hours inside the mansion again and again. Every conversation, every decision, every person who entered Daniel Whitmore's world before that final night. And slowly, the truth began to emerge. The evidence pointed in a direction that almost nobody expected. The person responsible was not discovered because of a dramatic confession, not because of a careless mistake, but because of one small, overlooked detail that had been in front of investigators from the very beginning. A detail that connected everything. The hidden messages, the financial records, the missing phone, the timeline of Daniel Whitmore's final hours. Suddenly, the pieces began falling into place. Detectives realized that the answer had been hidden inside the details most people ignored. The mansion where Daniel built his empire. The security system that failed at the exact moment it mattered most. The final conversations before his death. The decisions he made before returning home that night. Every piece revealed another part of the story. And when the complete picture finally became clear, public opinion changed overnight. The man millions admired was suddenly viewed through a different perspective. Friends, employees, business partners, Even people who had defended Daniel Whitmore began questioning how well they truly knew the person behind the success. For his family, the investigation brought painful answers. The mansion that once represented achievement, wealth, and happiness became a reminder of everything they had lost. The company Daniel Whitmore built continued moving forward, but his legacy would forever be connected to the mystery surrounding his final moments. The case was officially closed. Investigators had their answer. But even after the conclusion, one question remained. Could Daniel Whitmore's death have been prevented? Was there a warning sign that everyone missed? Was there a moment when someone could have discovered the truth before it was too late? Because sometimes the greatest mysteries do not come from strangers. They come from the people who know us best. The story returns to where it all began. The silent mansion. The rain falling against the windows of the estate where Daniel Whitmore once made billion-dollar decisions. The empty rooms where one of America's most powerful CEOs built a life that many people believed was perfect. A place that once represented success, wealth, and achievement. Now, it stands as a reminder that behind every public image, there can be hidden stories waiting to be discovered. Even after the investigation into Daniel Whitmore's death was closed, one unanswered question continued to divide investigators, journalists, and the public. Was justice truly served? Or does this case still hide one final secret? What do you think? Who do you believe was responsible for Daniel Whitmore's death? Which clue stood out to you the most? And did investigators overlook anything important? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoy true crime mysteries and real-life stories with unexpected twists, subscribe to Mind Blowing. Turn on notifications so you never miss any of our upcoming investigations. Because our next story uncovers another case where the truth was hidden in plain sight.